What is going on? What is going on? I accidentally updated. So like my stream dies just anytime I SVN update. That's great. That's great. Commit update version for beta, some stuff. Ba-boom. Okay, we're gonna go here. Before we're gonna let's documenting. I want to get the executable ready, and then we'll ship it after we're done let's documenting. I got the number wrong. Is SVN the better choice if your project has just a few contributors? I don't want to get into it. There are many reasons it's a better choice. Many reasons. It's not about number of contributors. It's about the structure of the project, what you want your user interface to be like for everybody using it, and how much data you have. Why is the category bad north? Because I failed to change it. Let's change that. Okay. What does Git do with binary files that makes it bad? You can find plenty of information about that on the internet. Okay. Yeah. Okay, I forgot. I tried to run it on the executable. What? Oh, it's okay. I get so confused because I never use the Linux version. For some reason, the executable is called test Linux, but the source file is not. Linux is equal to bad north, you know? That actually makes a lot of sense. That makes sense in certain ways. Okay. Well, we'll just leave this around in the background just in case we want it, but that is that. So we can push the button and ship the beta at any time. What do I use Ubuntu for? To make the Linux build. Does the compiler run significantly faster on one OS than another? I don't know. So that there was a virtual machine that's probably only allowed to use one processor, and that's very slow generally. So I wouldn't attempt to compare that. I do have a laptop over here somewhere that does run Linux natively, but I haven't really done timings. So the thing is, the Sokoban game, which is our biggest project, I don't really have it building on Linux right now. I'm not sure how much of an effort it would be to do that. So there's not really like a non-trivial comparison case anyway, which is what you would care about. Is that a fully static Linux binary? No, I wanted it to be, and people didn't want to do that for some reason, so I have to do it. The plan, so right now we compile on Ubuntu because it's just most people, like a lot of distributions are Ubuntu with different paint on it and stuff, right? And so the libraries tend to be compatible. The plan is to switch to Alpine Linux and use muscle libc and be fully static, but that is not how it is right now. I would like it to be like that. Is there a Mac build? We support Mac. However, we're not distributing Mac in the distro yet, just because I don't have a Mac, and it would be one more step. Like, while we're still shipping betas pretty frequently, I don't really want to slow it down to add another platform, basically, you know. And if I don't, like, we could set up an automated build for Mac, but if I can't sit here and verify it myself, I don't totally want to be shipping it blind, you know, like while we're still early in the stuff, I want to like know that it works. That's all. We'll ship Mac eventually. But, you know, non-static binaries are a recipe for disaster. I know. That is why I told people to make it non-static. Or sorry, to make it static, not non-static. I specifically said it is high priority to link against muscle libc on Alpine Linux, and people didn't do it. It's just what happens sometimes in life, and then you have to do it yourself. They designed the language with the sub-goal of porting an application to as many systems as easily as possible. I would say that falls out from the philosophy generally. So the philosophy generally is you shouldn't need as many tools as we seem to need today just to build a program. It's ridiculous. You shouldn't need as much entanglement with a specific operating system. Like, the program itself should define everything you need to compile it, right? So you should need just the compiler to compile it, and then you should be good. And that's not the way it is. So, of course, we're not 100% of the way there yet, but we're getting there. And so that means that as long as you had the compiler on your particular OS, and as long as, you know, whatever modules you're using supported that OS, you should be good. You shouldn't need other tools. And then, you know, languages like C and C++ have way too many operating system dependencies that they shouldn't. Like, you know, things like, how does left shift work or whatever, right? That's more like a CPU dependency. But, you know, what does file star mean? What is that defined as on this platform? Those things really shouldn't vary from platform to platform, but they do, and they cause a lot more problems than should be. So yeah, that's basically part of the idea. Will this philosophy be made clear in the documentation? Yeah, I mean, you know, I try to inject a little bit of philosophy because, you know, documentation is not just explaining what the things are, but like why they are the way they are, right? because you want people to understand, you want people to actually understand the thing, right? Not just like look at it and go, oh, that's the syntax or whatever. And so I'm trying to put that in, sometimes more successfully than others, because sometimes I have a lot of bugs to fix or whatever, but that's what we're doing right now, is we're going to write some documentation and to see what there is to see. Right now, the main thing I want to do is fill in some holes in even basic usage of this programming language, because I'm sure that there's a lot of basic stuff that's really useful that the beta testers don't really know about or don't understand is big or important, just because there's no documentation, right? Or not much. And so I want to try to hit some of those holes today. And so I'm okay doing it kind of sloppy to begin with. And then making it better. So I have notes somewhere of like what I wanted some of those to be. Do you want this language to be 100% done once it's fully released, or do you want to continuously update? I think there's such a thing as version 1 of the language that becomes stable, and then we think about version 2. But we're pretty far off from version 1 still. Okay. I want to do one just on, I guess we did one, I put in kind of a half-assed one on calling procedures. I think that was in the last beta. So people at least know, yeah, that was in the last beta. So people at least have some, whoops, that's the executable. People at least have some information about like parameters and stuff and multiple return values. That wasn't even documented at all till last beta, but people could see information about it just from like looking in other code that comes with the thing, but it's better to just talk about it. Okay, so we have that. So we could talk about context, the implicit context, which, there's a YouTube video for, and you can see it randomly used, but I would like to, all in one place, talk about that. Version 2 removes semicolons. I doubt it. Semicolons are useful. We use semicolons every day. Use pre-make. Ugh. You're banned. Banned. Okay. Look at all the things in the next beta. I even added one. Wait, did I not? Oh yeah, that was the last fix. Okay. So so the demos that I used to do on YouTube sort of got munged into test programs in a way that doesn't really preserve what was nice about them. So I went back and got an old version of the compiler that has the demos. And I can convert some of these. Like some of them will be so old that the syntax is not right or whatever. Yeah, I can grab some of these. So we could say O11 context. All right. I'm going to have to renumber these at some point. I thought I was putting lots of space between the numbers, but there's lots of space in the later numbers. All right. How do I manage to keep motivation on long-term projects? Because I want to do them. I really want to do them. Do I think it's viable to build a new OS? Yes. I do think if I were making a new OS, I would make it for fixed hardware to begin with. I wouldn't try to support all hardware because that's bananas. Would you go microkernel route? Something like that. I mean, it wouldn't be, I don't think it would correspond to a traditional microkernel either. How far back in terms of the fixed hardware? It's not about back. It's about, like, I wouldn't make a retro console or something. No, it's about just pick very specific hardware that's as simple as possible, very simple firmware, and make the OS for that system. It could be a totally modern, very fast computer. In fact, it's probably best to do that. How do you remain disciplined as opposed to motivated to keep going? I mean, discipline is something you can learn. If you don't have discipline, go to Kung Fu school for a couple years or something. You'll learn it. Can't do that right now because they're all closed, but you know, someday. What about BJJ? That's probably fine, as long as it's a serious school. How have function parameter semantics shaken out by now? They're the same as they ever was. I haven't changed it since the initial implementation. What about pointer aliasing? We haven't really thought about that very much yet. Oh, good. There's a crazy homeless person on drugs yelling outside the window. Okay, so this is a really old thing that I did a YouTube demo with. And I just want to look at this and see, should I start with this or should I write a new thing? Like, why do I have allocator stuff in here? Oh, because, right, context, you set it. This is maybe not actually the best demo in retrospect because oh, this is probably fine, actually. So just a little bit talking about, hey, you can set the memory allocator and go do stuff. That's one thing that the context is for. You can, or we could even do it with the logger. Oh, here's this thing, oh, thread demo. Logging, okay. I think we're going to restructure kind of what's here. What's my opinion on having bad work ethic? I used to have, by that definition, being not productive when you're working on company stuff, I used to have a terrible work ethic. I mean, I don't think that's what that means, but if you're going to use that phrase, then I used to be terrible at that. And it was because I wasn't doing the right thing for my personality. So maybe you're not doing the right thing for your personality. Maybe you shouldn't be at that company or any company. I'm not thinking about version 2 of the language. God, I'm just saying that would be a later thing. Okay. I'm going to stop reading questions for a little bit. So let's let me just draft out the things we want to say. There is a thing called context. Base is defined in modules preload. Stuff can get added onto the base to make context. We'll talk about how later, and so later use of add context to add things to the context. Okay. Stuff can get added onto the base to make, there's a thing called context. It gets passed to any procedure as an implicit argument. Each thread has its own context, so you don't have to worry about bases, etc. There's a thread ID in the context that you can use in accessing global data structures and whatnot. There's an integer thread ID. What else should we, okay. Let's actually talk about where it's defined later. One common use, replacing memory allocator for large chunks of code. That way you can write a library, a module, whatever, module, not worry much about allocation and the user of your module still has control over the memory. Hopefully this reduces the amount of effort it takes to make a good module. Another common use, replacing the logger. Alloc in modules basic just calls context.allocator. Another common use, replacing the logger. Okay. I know I had more things I wanted to say. Let's go look at preload context base. Allocator logger, assertion failed. Context also contains the stack trace. You can see this. We'll do temporary storage in 012. Should certain things that are implemented in the standard library, like context, be part of? No, context isn't implemented in the standard library. It's implemented in the compiler. That's not, the language is very separate from the standard library, which isn't even really a thing. Okay. Well, yeah, chat is really annoying right now, honestly. I'm starting to think, why did I stream? Why did I stream? Okay. What else do we want to say? Okay. You can modify the context either by writing directly to members or by using push context. Okay, we'll explain that. Limitations. C call routines can't see the context. There's something I could do about that someday, but for now, C call routines can't see the context. This is something we may be able to address in the future. Because any procedure in this language needs to have a context in order to run. If you want to call a non-C call routine from a C call, you need to push a context as follows. Okay. Great. That's a very old thing. Okay, so I think maybe that's the outline and we just start filling this out with stuff and see where it goes. Does the context add much overhead to function calls? Not really. Can it be optimized out if the callee doesn't use it? In principle, it could be. The thing is that the callee would also not, it would also have to not call anyone else, right? If you had a super leaf function that just does some math or whatever and doesn't call anything except for C calls, and doesn't refer to the context, then yes, we could optimize it out. We don't currently, but we could. Okay. How do I start this? How do we get into this explanation? Traditionally, in languages like C++, programs run into trouble when they want to control the way memory is allocated while also using code written by someone else. in C++ especially, the things you have to do to replace the allocator globally are ugly and error prone, and they still may not get you the flexibility you want. Are ugly, error prone, and create a great deal of, what would you say, and add a great deal of friction to, I almost don't know what to call it, like an increase in the kinds of problems you have in linking. I don't know. That could be phrased better. Just trying to motivate what we're doing here. Yeah, we fixed that. Watch the rest of the video. We fixed it. The context is the general encapsulation of the AOS SOA. No, those two things have nothing to do with each other at all. Zilch. You might want one library to allocate its memory from one particular heap. Is not the only kind of operation where you may want this flexibility. Logging and assertion handling are other such cases. You might want go from library to module, because one module or from one subtree of your programs. From another subtree to go to another place. You'd like this to happen without the code you are calling. Well, okay. Let's go into more detail on this. Sometimes if someone is writing code for general use, they will realize that many programmers want control over these things, and they'll provide you facilities to control control these operations. With regard to their library. In their library. But then every library has a different API for this. They give you control over different sets of things at different degrees of, they give you different degrees of control over different sets of things. And many libraries will give you much less control than you would like. So we have conventions for this built into the core of this programming language. There's a structure there's a data structure called the context that gets passed implicitly from procedure to procedure as your program runs. It contains the information needed to it gives you the ability to easily control how memory allocation, logging, and so forth are handled. For example, let's just in bare procedure with no arguments, we can print out the context. And you can see what it looks like. Okay. All right. Bare procedure takes no arguments. Print the context is okay. Let's just comment out this entire old program here. Whoops, well, we have to go. Okay, that's really funny. Undeclared identifier, that's not a good, all right. That's interesting. So the type of context isn't a pointer. Why did I do that? I kind of know why I did that, but I'm questioning the decision at this time. I am questioning the decision. Okay. Now what? You can change the context just as you would with any instance of a struct. When you do that, the change will be passed on to everyone. Proc2 it's a good context member. Okay. Proc2 says context.silly number is whatever silly number. Before calling proc2, proc1 says, let's take out the comma. After before calling proc1, whoops.